Could you? I practiced, Liz, and got it down pat.
I saw that.
Hey, Liz, do we know if Brian or Maureen are coming this evening?
I don't know. I haven't heard from Brian, but I know Maureen said that she may have to start with on the phone and then switch over, but I haven't heard from her. That was early this afternoon. I kind of let her know that we were having some issues, and but then also let her know when they were resolved. So I'm not really sure.
Mike, are you comfortable if I go ahead and get started, or should we give them a minute?
Who are we waiting on, Sarah?
Brian Simmerly and Maureen Adler.
Yeah, I'm fine with waiting a minute or two.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening, Mayor.
Here.
Here's Maureen right here.
Maureen. I'll give one more minute for Brian.
Sounds good, Sarah.
Thank you.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. If Brian joins us, hopefully we can get him.
Here's Brian right here.
Oh, yay! Okay. I will call the Local Government and Community Services Committee to order at 6:32 p.m. We have two things to discuss tonight. The first one is Ordinance 2113, which authorizes the mayor to enter into an agreement with Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court for a juvenile diversion program. The second thing is we'll be addressing the issue of systemic racism. Tonight specifically, we will be interviewing additional candidates for the DEI coalition. So I'd like to open up the evening by talking about Ordinance 2113, which is the juvenile diversion program. So Mayor, I don't know if you want to give us a thought or a description of what this is about.
Thank you. This is a program we discussed last year with Richard Gibbons from the Juvenile Court. It's an extension of that program. We did not, I don't think we had any participants last year, mostly because of COVID. I think all the benefits to the program that we discussed last year would apply, going forward. And it's just an annual contract renewal. And it's something that we're ready to proceed with. You last year you had approved the contract. It authorized our prosecutor John Costell to serve as the voluntary magistrate, and that was the plan going forward. And that John would handle that role as these cases arose.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I open the floor for discussion, I did want to state that I think there should be an amendment made to the legislation. In the opening, it says that we are going to enter into the agreement and establish a community diversion program fund. That program fund has already been established. So my recommendation is that we strike this particular verbiage, establishing a community diversion program fund as a special revenue from the ordinance. So I guess with that being said, I will open the floor.
I don't have any voice coming through. I don't hear anything. Does anybody else have this problem?
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Can hear everybody.
Yeah, I can hear fine.
I can
I
hear
can
everyone fine.
Hold on.
Liz, maybe you could chat to Maureen
Yeah,
and let her
that's-
know that it's just her. Thank you.
Okay, I hear you now. I hear you now. I'll
Fine.
unmute my voice. Okay.
So I guess with that being said, Maureen, we just said that we're going to strike the verbiage establishing a community diversion program fund as a special revenue fund because that has already been established. And with that amendment, is there any discussion? Does council have any questions regarding this contract?
No.
No, and that's a good,
No.
that's a good amendment.
Okay. So then I don't have any other questions on this either. This is a great program. I know we got a lot of our questions answered last year. I just want to confirm, Mayor, for our own sake, this is a program that we do or do not pay into. I believe we do not pay into, correct?
That's correct. I mean, there's some resources that we have, and obviously with the police, and but Ms. John Costell is volunteering his time, and then we would have somebody from the administration assist him when there are cases before him. But other than that, we're not expending any funds.
Which is fantastic, both for our city and for our juveniles who may go through this program. So with that being said, I'm going to make a motion to put this on second, subsequent, third reading. So Mike?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Sarah, yes. Maureen? Maureen might be frozen. I'll come back to her. Bridget?
Yes.
Maureen, yes.
Yes.
Bridget?
Yes.
And Greg?
Yes.
Awesome. Motion passes 7-0. I'll be honest, I try to go around the table, and it's been so long since we've been at that table, I kind of forget the order now. You guys sit in a different order on my screen. Okay. So that's great. We passed that second, subsequent, third with a vote of 7-0. The second item that we're discussing tonight is the issue of systemic racism and the city's response to that. So tonight we have several people who we are interviewing for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coalition. And we're going to do this the same way we did last week. I will ask 2 questions, and then I'm going to encourage council and the mayor to ask follow-up questions and really try to get to the heart of why these candidates are the best fit. Liz, do we have at least the first person queued up?
Yes, I can bring him up right now.
And could I ask you again to play timekeeper for me to make sure that we are being fair to each of the candidates?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, if everybody's ready, we're just going to start a minute early. Brian Gibbons, are you with us and are you ready? Can we start early?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for showing up tonight and interviewing and showing interest in this committee. We definitely think it's important and we are really looking for community engagement. So I'm going to ask you two questions. The first question is, what makes you a good fit for this task force?
I think that basically my life experience, living both growing up in Greater Cleveland, living around the city, growing up in East Cleveland and Fairview Park, living in all sorts of different neighborhoods on East and West Side in Cleveland and around the country. I have a lot of different life experience within communities that I lived in, within the workplace that I lived in, within the schools that I attended, and that sort of thing that helped expose me to different ideas, different cultures, and different people. And over time, it took any number of years and that sort of thing, began to realize that, you know, whether it's racist or sexist or anti-gay behavior and that sort of thing, it's learned activity. It's not something that people are born with. It's what people learn over time in their daily life, going to school, in the workplace, in daily life, and that sort of thing. And it's important that it be unlearned and that sort of thing. And that I think also comes through exposure to people, exposure to cultures, exposure in different scenarios and stuff, some of not of your own choosing, but all that help you grow as an individual. And I think that that's what you find with folks who particularly either are active in this arena or just people who in their daily life find that, yeah, this is pretty, abhorrent situations that we have at times in the society, and are more than interested in seeing that change so that basically society is equitable. So that's what I think, that's the experience that I bring to the table. And that's why I'd be interested in participating in the process within the city.
Thank you for that. Can you tell me a little bit about the actionable steps you'd like to take to make a change in our community?
I think the actionable steps include, one is just forming this committee and that sort of thing, communicating with both the mayor's office and with council. There may be particular issues that they'd like to see addressed and that sort of thing, and working with the committee, figuring out a game plan. I think that there's the opportunity to explore with different organizations, explore just with the public in general. I think it was mentioned in previous interviews about the idea of, kind of like polling the public and finding out more about attitudes and experiences and that sort of thing in the community that may deserve attention, some sort of action, even praise for that matter, in things that were going well. Other things that I think that are helpful would be working with different community organizations, whether it's like relatively new to the community, moved back 3 years ago. So say like Junior Women's, Rotary, the various churches and that sort of thing. And thinking about that just on the religious sector, working with churches and other faith groups, is that the baseline is that probably most people, whether they're churchgoers or not, their idea on life is, and their moral compass is basically based on Abrahamic religions, whether it's Muslim, Christian, or Jewish, all of which, find, anti-whatever behavior not healthy and not consistent with the religions. So working with the churches might also be another way to bring that out. There's the school committee that's going on right now, the diversity equity initiative there. So I think that between different activities that I can think of, but also what the committee might have and anything that might be requested of, city council or the mayor's office too, and that sort of thing, I think all those would come out with a game plan for the city and for the community.
Thank you. Mayor Cooney, would you like an opportunity to ask a question or two?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Gibbons, how are you today? Thanks for joining us.
I'm fine. Thanks.
I see it's looking at your submission. It looks like you've lived in a lot of different places throughout the United States.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering how you feel Fairview Park, how that compares to some of the places you lived and how they handle issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and how you would, what you would see to be the primary goal of this coalition, maybe based on that experience in other communities, and how you would go about helping us maybe become a little more attuned to those matters.
Yeah. Well, I've lived around the country, both major metropolitan areas, Washington, D.C., Cleveland, of course, and Los Angeles, also smaller places, Garden City, Kansas, Grand Forks, North Dakota. And each community is unique. Each community has its own parochialism and that sort of thing. I don't think anybody's actually solved this nut, that's for sure. Probably the place that did best was probably Greenbelt, Maryland, the last place I lived. I lived there for 17 years. But Greenbelt has a historic commitment to inclusion within the city itself. You can look online and research about Greenbelt, Maryland. There's quite a story about its origins and that sort of thing, and I won't get into that. But it was in each city, it was a matter of, I think, tackling difficult questions and stuff. Fairview, in and of itself, on a continuum, it's not bad, good, it's not whatever, it's another community. I think it's part of the fabric of life. And my exposure in that sense was actually when I learned that city council meetings were online. I came online and it was the night that Ms. Westbrooks testified at the very end. And it was a little stunning and stuff. And if anything, I think it was just that, it exists and sometimes we're, inured, if that's the correct word to it. So there was this it's not hard for people to recognize that it happens, but it's sometimes hard to recognize that it happens in our own neighborhood. And it's part of daily life and it's part of the fabric that is within this nation. And so that's, when I figured, well, maybe I can jump in and help. And again, I don't feel that I have answers per se. I think that it's more like, because it's a conversation and on where to start and that sort of thing. I have some ideas about things that, because it's a learned behavior, about ideas about like films and stuff, even things that I saw in high school at Fairview High School, like the movie Harvest of Shame or the documentary Harvest of Shame, which is about farm workers in the United States, that sort of thing. That still exists, even though that was like 60 or 52 years ago that I saw that. So those are the kind of things that I think that, just needs to be recognized, and, people have to be comfortable with taking it on, and it's not challenging people, not saying that you're wrong, because again, as I mentioned early on, it's learned behavior. It's like, how do you get people to recognize that this situation exists and what do we want to do to help remedy it?
Thank you.
Council, would you like to ask some questions of Mr. Gibbons?
Sure. I got first a quick one. So you said you graduated from Fairview High School. Can I ask what year?
1970.
1970. All right. You were 3 years before my dad.
Okay.
He was also an alumni. So the one question that I have for you is, you've mentioned about the learned versus the learned behavior and made comment too that it needs to be unlearned. So from your experiences and all the that you've been involved with throughout, what is a tactic or an approach that you use to help have a learned behavior become unlearned?
Well, I think you have to kind of challenge behavior in that sense, and not challenge in the sense of a shove or a push, but it's more like, why do you feel this way? Why do we feel that like bearded gentlemen, are suspect? It's like, and I think that's really the heart of it is raising that question, raising those questions, and raising them in a way that's comfortable, raising them in a way that doesn't put people off. Because last thing you want to do is turn people away. You want to try to change people, the way people are thinking and stuff. And this kind of behavior in our society comes in many tiers, in the sense that there's just the civility aspect of it. You just get along with people. There's also systemic racism at the far end, which is something that we're not necessarily going to solve in Fairview Park, but certainly what we're going to do, I think, is be able to, raise questions so people then begin to think, yeah, this is kind of screwy. Just as an example, going back to those years growing up in the 60s in Fairview, remember watching on television. I had the advantage of watching the civil rights movement on television, because it was all being broadcast. And there were only 3 stations that you could turn to anyways. And while I was watching people getting hosed and dogs, it was kind of like, these are people that I'm kind of learning we're supposed to avoid. And if we're supposed to avoid them, then why are we messing with them? Just leave them alone. And that sort of thing. And it began, a thought process, So I think that's a part of it. You have to, you have to have a framework in mind on how to address a question and address it in such a way that you can get the conversation going. And it won't be one conversation. It'll be, you have to be in it for the long haul.
Great, thank you.
Chairwoman, if I may.
Yes, please.
Mr. Gibbons, thanks for joining us tonight. And thanks for your interest in this coalition. You have some really diverse experiences in your application here, work experiences and then political experiences. A CEO and a union steward.
Yeah.
Ends of the spectrum there. I wonder if you might just talk a little bit about that for a second.
Okay. Well, for the most part, after leaving Fairview and that sort of thing, ended up working and working actually, lots of different jobs. But I ended up mostly as a warehouseman. And then as a warehouseman, that's how I ended up becoming a union steward and that sort of thing. The CEO, I mean, it's a little elevated, it may be, but those were of public radio stations, generally smaller public radio stations around the country. When I got involved in public radio was in the 80s, and you could do that by volunteering. And after volunteering for 4 years and recognizing that the warehouse job wasn't going to go very far, I figured I could, maybe turn it into a paying job, which I did. And I just went to the places that needed the most help. And then again, through most of my career, just being able to show up and do the work and that sort of thing, I was able to rise through the ranks. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks from this longtime union organizer, steward, and official. Thank you. That's all, Chairwoman, for me.
Thank you. I think we have about 2 minutes left. Council, do you have any other questions? Okay, Mr. Gibbons, if you could leave us with one thing that makes you different from all of these other candidates, what would you say the number one, I guess, characteristic you have is that would really impact this task force?
Well, I think that, I think it's a willingness to, if given the assignment, if I'm fortunate enough to be appointed, is to help see the project through. One of the things that was common, throughout my career, my ability to rise through the ranks into positions that typically had credentials tied to them, which I didn't have, was that people found, people that hired me found that I was resourceful, that I was willing to figure out how to do things and how to approach things. And I think that that's something that I would bring to the table, and be willing to share. I've got lots of experience, I've got lots of resources that I'm aware of that may be beneficial and maybe something for the city to take advantage of. One thing that did cross my mind real quickly when people said, what would you like to do, is that one thing I noticed was that if I looked at it correctly, like the Fairview Park Historical Society has an interesting thing, but there's a lot of interesting people from Fairview Park that might make, kind of like, things that people, would want to know more about Fairview Park, which also shows off some of its diversity. Some of it you probably already know, like Sally Priesand being the first female rabbi in the United States. It's from Fairview Park. Or, you've got Mike Garcia from the Cleveland Indians, Mexican-American, lived in Fairview Park. a baseball pitcher in the 50s, one of the best in the 50s and that sort of thing. But again, a Fairview Park resident who overcame things to become a big league ball player. Those are the kind of things that I think that also the city just, people in the city may not recognize that Fairview isn't this one-dimensional sort of place. It's got lots of different things to offer.
Thank you for that. Mr. Gibbons, we really appreciate your time tonight and all of your answers. Thank you so much for your dedication to this issue. I'm not sure if you watched last week, but essentially we have tonight and one more set of interviews. So it might be a little bit of time before you hear from us, but you definitely will hear from us either way.
Okay, well, thanks.
Time.
Okay, well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Have a great night.
All right, take care. Bye now.
You too.
Thank you.
Liz, by chance, do we have Melissa Russo on?
She's in right now, yes.
Oh, wonderful. Ms. Russo? Oh, you're muted.
Hi,
Hi there. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm good. We're a couple minutes early. Are you okay if we start early?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your passion and your desire to serve on this committee.
Thank you.
I'm
for
going to
having me.
ask you two questions, and the council and the mayor will ask some follow-up questions, okay?
Okay.
So the first question that I have for you is, what do you feel makes you a good fit for this task force?
So I think, so I read a lot and I ponder a lot and I think about things a lot. And I think what my strength would be is as I have ideas and I think facilitating those ideas with the right people. So let's say for like educators, obviously I'm not going to go into a classroom and teach about anti-racism, but starting the dialogue and the communication about different ways to maybe change things or, just bring different curriculums into the schools. So I think that would be one of my strengths is reaching out to people and then also having that dialogue with the members of the coalition and, mayor, council people, whoever will be involved in this process.
Thank you. What actionable steps would you take to make a change in our community?
Well, I think just kind of piggybacking off of that is, approaching different people in the community. Like I said, educators, police forces, and just members of the community, see what their wants are, what do they need. And what I like about this kind of task force, this coalition, is it's not even dealing just with race, but it was, what I read from the summary, it was dealing with people of different income levels, different religions, different, maybe sexual orientation. So I think it all starts for me with communication and having people talking to each other about these issues that are not always easy to talk about. But I think that's the only way to kind of bridge the gaps that we have in our society is to start those conversations.
Thank you. Mayor, would you like the opportunity?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Russo, thanks for joining us tonight. I hope you're doing all right.
Yes, thanks.
So how would you communicate with people to, ways to, maybe to expand on increasing the diversity of our town and communicating what you feel the goals of the coalition would be?
How would I communicate those things?
Yeah, I mean, how, yes, I mean, not just to the coalition, but to the community as a whole.
I mean, I don't know if that would probably consist of meetings or, town meetings, maybe smaller group meetings where you have these discussions with different groups of people, surveys, potentially, maybe, as if maybe people don't feel comfortable going face to face with people, like surveys. You know, I guess that would be my thing, is seeing where people are at in as far as, you know, how they want to communicate. So, yeah, I mean, I think.
Oh, okay, I appreciate that. And I know you mentioned you like the fact that this coalition would address various issues, you know, race, sexual orientation, income levels. What do you view as the primary goal of the coalition? You know, its mission, and how would you go about helping that achieve its mission?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the goals, I'm sure there's potentially a lot of goals that could come out of this, but one of the goals is for people to be seen and people to be heard and people to feel like they have a place in the community. Not saying that all these people don't feel that way already, but, you know, I'm not sure about that. So I think it's for people to feel like they're being recognized and they're being heard, and they have, maybe they want to have some kind of, what's the word, active work in the community, and they don't really know how to go about it. So maybe this could be, again, like I said, a bridge between community members and then different other aspects of the community that have, I don't want to say higher power, but have more like bigger responsibilities for the community as a whole. So yeah, so I think that the goal is just for people to be recognized.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Council, would anyone like to ask a question?
Sure, Ms. Russo, thank you for coming in. We appreciate the interest and the question that I have. So you made a couple of mentions to communication, bridging gaps. I think it's all great stuff, all very important. Why do you think it's so important to have open and positive dialogue, like you were talking about during these times of communication?
Because I don't really know any other way to kind of go about this kind of endeavor is without dialogue. People can read as much as they want to read, or be on Facebook and read articles as much as they want to read, but it's easy to put a book down. It's easy to shut the computer off. But when you actually have to go out in the community and talk with people and hear people's stories, that I think it makes a huge difference for, I think a lot of people, I mean, I can't speak obviously for people, but I think one of the issues is people, not that they don't empathize with people, but they don't know their stories. If you're not doing the work of actually looking into what are people's backgrounds and histories and stories, and from a personal perspective, it's hard to relate to people. And so, you know, so you can find that through books or through different other mediums like that. But I think when you really start having the conversations, and I think that's when that kind of interaction is really, it's the most important thing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Sarah, if I can go. Like Greg mentioned, Mr. So thanks for joining tonight. My question was just around you. Mentioned you've done a lot of reading on the topic and things like that. Is there anything that you found or have read that really kind of stuck out to you that other communities have done or other groups have done that really either try to combat this issue or solve this issue that you might want to bring to the coalition?
Yeah, so I would have to go back for some of the stuff, but I was listening to a podcast the other day. I'm already started blanking on the podcast name. And it was, I think it was a community it might have been Oakland, California, and different things that they were doing to kind of bridge those gaps. I'm actually reading right now, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And that has a lot of ideas, and that really hits different points from preschool age all the way through adolescence, college, and then even after, like in the workforce. So it really covers more than I even thought it was going to cover. And so they go through people's experiences and different ways to different other books for readings, different things to bring into the classroom. So it's probably stuff I would have to like go back over and kind of compile, as opposed to just like sitting here and spewing off stuff. But I have come across some things between different podcasts I've listened to and different books that I've read over the course of, the past year or so.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please go ahead.
Melissa, one of the comments you made was it's important to be involved in your community, which I think is exactly spot on. And that's where I love, all the people coming forward who want to be involved in this. But then what's interesting is one of the things you said is you haven't witnessed racism in Fairview Park, but you're sure it exists. So, that's what I find it interesting. It's not something you've witnessed here yet. You're looking to get involved in a organization that will hope to combat it. Are there other prejudices that you have witnessed in Fairview Park, or are you focused more on kind of more our society versus Fairview Park specifically? I'm just curious, to step forward and want to do this, I find interesting, particularly if you haven't, it hasn't been something you've witnessed. Have you witnessed other forms of prejudices in Fairview?
No, not specifically. Like I've never witnessed, well, actually, okay, I'm going to take that back. Actually, I actually see on the playground, I live right by Grandis Park, and on the playground, there have been some instances between, I don't know if it's Muslims who live in the apartments that at the playground, and then there's been some situations with the kids of white kids saying stuff to the Muslim kids and kind of making fun of them. So actually, I'll take that back. That because I just witnessed it earlier, actually today. So yeah. I have, and have I witnessed like every day? Do I see stuff when I'm out in the stores and stuff like that? No, I don't. But so yes, I'm looking to help things in our community, but as a society as a whole, I can't fix society. We all have to start, I feel, with our smaller segments, and that's how it builds
right
over, larger groups or the city of Cleveland or whatever. It has to start within our small space, and then it branches out from there. So, so yeah, like I the fact that I said I assume it. How could it not be prevalent in people's homes? I grew up hearing things, and from a small age. So how I don't think that would Fairview Park. Is it a beautiful community? Is it a great community? Absolutely, but I think to think that racism doesn't exist in Fairview Park. I wouldn't be able to say that, even though I don't see things on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Council, does anyone else have any questions?
Chairwoman Waring,
Yes, please.
if I may. Yeah, I just have a comment to what Councilwoman Adler and to what Ms. Russo, her reply about not seeing a specific instance of racism in Fairview Park, and to Ms. Russo's answer that you just have to do what you can do in our small space in our communities. To say to see a specific instance of racism in Fairview Park, really, you just have to look at the housing in Fairview Park. It's systemic racism before your eyes. We all see it every day. But yeah, you're right. it's a huge problem. It is systemic. And what you said, Ms. Russo, to say that we just have to start in our own little bubble in our communities, you're absolutely right. It's a big task, and it's before our eyes every day. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Russo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Russo, we have about 1 minute left. I wondered if there's anything we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to say in closing.
No, I mean, I think those were great questions, and I hope I've answered them to the best of my ability in this, short of time. No, I don't think I don't think I have any questions or anything.
Wonderful. Well, hey, we really appreciate your time. We appreciate you coming in, giving us some perspective that we might not have had without this interview.
Thank you.
We will be interviewing people this evening and then again in 2 weeks. So you will hear from us. I just can't guarantee quite how soon we will be making this decision. So I just want to make you aware that it will be a period of time.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Russo. Have a great
All right.
night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. I believe I see our next applicant coming on soon. Ms. Dubé-Gillis, are you here? There you are. Oh, you're muted.
I am. Hi, sorry.
That's all right. I think that's like the number one thing we do on Zoom, right? We all mute ourselves.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good, thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for extending the time to make these interviews happen for the coalition.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start by asking you 2 questions, and then you'll have a series of follow-ups. And then hopefully you'll have time to give us a little bit of maybe what we missed in our questions. Okay. So the first question I have for you is, what makes you a good fit for this task force?
Well, I mean, there's nothing super special about me. I am, I guess, career-wise, for the past 25 years, I've been an environmental consultant doing public education and outreach. So I've had to facilitate, groups of folks from all walks of life on pretty controversial issues having to do with, water quality and working with municipalities all over the country. Most recently, my primary client was the city of Detroit, working on water issues for the city of Detroit. So I would bring to the table the ability to facilitate groups with diverse perspectives and opinions. Outside of that, more locally, I was recently on our school board, elected for a 4-year term and served that. So again, I think I bring that perspective of what it's like to be an elected official, beholden to folks within our community, trying to look at all of the issues surrounding diversity, equity, justice, inclusion for a student body, and could take that experience and relate it specifically to this coalition, looking at the city side of things. And I think as a Fairview Park citizen, I am always wanting to figure out how I can contribute to make our community stronger, better, for the folks that are here now and the folks that I'd seek to move here in the future. So those are some of the things that I think I would bring to the table. And I think that I also am pretty self-aware in terms of where my own biases are, and am constantly striving to address those, educate myself, and listen and learn and do better as I learn.
Thank you. What actionable steps would you like to take to make a change in our community?
Well, right now, one thing I forgot to mention in my opening remarks or answer to your question was the fact that I'm actually currently serving on the DEIJ task force or coalition for the school district. So even though my role with school board has ended, I am co-chairing the parent subcommittee for that group, along with another parent. And so I think the perspective and skills that I'm gaining through that particular activity would apply to what we're trying to do on the city side of things. And in terms of what actionable things we want to change, I think if we used a process that's similar to what is being done on the school side through the appreciative inquiry process, we would be able to develop some sort of an implementation plan that had action items. I wouldn't want to assume that I know what those action items are. I think that is the process that has to unfold with the coalition. I don't want to go in having predetermined notion of the things that we should do. I think it's based on the information that we collect. Part of the appreciative inquiry process that we've been using through the school district, facilitated by the Northeast Ohio Diversity Center, has been to look at what the strengths are of the school district. So I would hope that we could do that for the city as well, figure out what we're doing well, and then figure out what our vision is for what we would like the city to be like, and then figure out what steps we need to take to go from where we are now to what that vision might be. And so we would want to probably look at things like policies. We would want to look at hiring practices. We would want to look at, programs and initiatives that we may not have in the community that we could start to, address the issues of equity and inclusion within Fairview Park, and either address problems that exist or, put programs in place to ensure that, we have a more equitable community. So
Thank you.
it starts with the process. I can't say what the outcomes are. I think I'm a very process oriented person.
Understandable. Mayor, would you like to ask a couple questions?
Yes, I would. Thanks, Mr. Bay-Gillis. Thanks for joining us today.
Sure.
So you talked about you facilitate discussions in various communities. Can you expand on what your position is there, and how you go about facilitating these projects that you're working on?
Yeah.
And how it might, I'm sorry to interrupt, how it might assist in this process here?
Well, most of the time when I'm facilitating community meetings, it's to deal with a controversial issue or to put a new program in place, and we want to get input on a program or initiative or a project before it moves forward. So part of what I do is I come up with a public outreach strategy, which means identifying all the people who could be affected by decisions that our client, usually municipalities, could make, and getting those folks to the table and developing a meaningful process for them to weigh in. Part of it is also addressing for folks, what parts of the decision-making process they can influence, and letting them know which parts are sort of off the table that are non-negotiable. So being really clear and transparent with where folks can affect things. And I think that process is really important to come up with a plan. You want buy-in from folks, you want to hear all opinions at the table, and then you want to bring it to the folks who would actually have to implement the plan, which in some cases would be all of you as mayor, council members. This particular group, we could only do so much. We could figure out where we as residents have leverage to implement certain actions, but ideally, most likely what's going to happen is we would present an implementation action plan to all of you where, we would be asking you to look at different policies or programs. And so we would need, buy-in from residents, but also buy-in from our elected officials as well. So I think that process of bringing folks to the table, listening to diverse perspectives, and then figuring out how to collaborate to get to a consensus decision is something that would really benefit this coalition.
What do you see the primary goal of the coalition being, and how would you go about helping it achieve that?
Well, I assume that with 9 people from our community, we're all going to be coming together with different perspectives. I think, first of all, would be figuring out what process we want to use to, decide, are there problems that we want to fix? Are there programs or initiatives that we need to put in place? So, coming up, collaborating on a process, and then letting that process unfold, and also talking about, what are the goals of the coalition? And I would hope the goal is to come up with an implementation plan, an action plan that addresses different facets of our city government and activities that we have decided as a group need some sort of forward momentum in order to make our community more equitable, more inclusive, more just, more diverse. So I would like to see an action plan with bulleted lists of things we need to do, the rationale behind it, data to support that, and it's supported by bringing folks to the table for them to share their anecdotal information. Maybe we need to put some more data collection mechanisms in place so we have more information around some of those decision points, and then identifying who needs to take the lead within the city on making those things happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions for Ms. DeBig-Ellis?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Big-Ellis, thank you for coming in. Appreciate the interest and taking the time. So with the coalition with the school in the city, what do you see as some of the major similarities and differences between the two and how they may approach things?
Well, for me, I think, and I said this in my application, the thing that struck me when I was on school board is just how not diverse our staff was. And as a school board member, I needed to really take a step back and start asking the questions of, why is that the case? Even though we're a predominantly white community, that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities, as the institution who is the largest employer in the community shouldn't necessarily be hiring, and that we shouldn't, have a diverse staff. We should have a diverse staff. Kids should see themselves represented in leadership positions in the school district. And if you flip to the city side of things, it's the same issue. All of our elected officials are white. Most of the folks that hold key positions in the city are white. So I think our diversity right now, the city and the school side, doesn't reflect the composition of who we are, in America. And I think we need to ask ourselves the tough and uncomfortable questions of why is that? Are there specific reasons that that's happening? And if so, what can we do to overcome those challenges? So hopefully through, our experience in putting together an implementation plan for the school district, some of those questions that we're asking ourselves on that side of the community are very applicable to what we would have to ask ourselves on the city side.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go right ahead.
if I may. Yes, one of the, I did like your statement where you said racism and discrimination are a fact, not an opinion. That's a good, strong statement. And I thought it was, well stated. And that I did want to ask, you said you're the current co-chair for the parent subcommittee, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice subcommittee. I was just curious, how much have they gotten going and how often do they meet, as well as how has it been received, as far as by parents, getting them actively involved in this? I didn't know how far along you were with this.
Well, we're, just a few months into it right now. As a co-chair, we are the structure of what the Northeast Ohio Diversity Center has us do. We have, the overall task force, and then we have subcommittees, and then we have the steering committee made up of the co-chairs. So right now I'm with my other co-chair. We're meeting 3 times a week. We're meeting once for a steering committee, and we'll have that meeting tomorrow. It's Monday, right? So tomorrow is our steering committee meeting, and then we need to plan our own subcommittee meeting. And we have a core group of parents that are involved. We have some folks that just communicate via email and haven't necessarily shown up to participate. And then the full group gets together for the task force meetings. And then the various subcommittees report out to one another. And then it's facilitated by the experts over at the Diversity Center. So they lead us through this appreciative inquiry process. And so we've done sort of the dream state. We've identified what we're doing great in the district. We've identified our vision for the district. We've identified and done that through vision statements. We've identified, where we want to go, and we're in the process now. This particular week, we'll be focusing on different data collection mechanisms, whether it's anecdotal or quantifiable data, to help us address some of our vision statements and figure out where there are gaps that we need to get from point A to point B to achieve that vision. And I think that, the process, it's a very rich process. It's very well thought out. And I'm super grateful that the district has brought them on to lead the way. And, I feel what we're learning is definitely applicable. And there, I think a few of us that have interviewed for the city side that have done the district, the diversity task force there that could, take what we've learned and apply it. I would never want to use any of their proprietary information, but the process is pretty stepwise approach, and I think we could apply that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You definitely could draw from them, and bring it into the city's task force. So that ideally, we're kind of working together, indirectly. So.
Right. And
All
I saw
right.
the mayor there at one of the last task force meetings. So that was great. I mean, one thing I said in my application, I would hope that we could find and secure some sort of grant funding that would let us bring in a facilitator. Even though I have that background, I firmly believe that you need to have sort of a third party neutral person or persons to come in and facilitate. I have strong opinions about, things I'd like to do. And as a facilitator, I wouldn't be allowed to share those opinions. I would rather participate in the coalition than try to be the neutral, unbiased facilitator. I think it's beneficial to have somebody playing that role if possible. So whether we find grant monies to bring them in, or, we could maybe partner with another local organization that has expertise, but maybe is cost effective. It's something along those lines. I think.
Okay, thank you.
Coalition. Yep.
Thank you. Ms. DeBiggillis, we have about 1 minute left. Is there anything we haven't discussed yet that you'd really like to leave us with?
I just, the first question on the application, this idea of, whether it's a problem in Fairview Park. I mean, that's a question that has sort of haunted me because I think, I've seen comments on the previous set of interviews. Somebody had participated and said, what problems do we have in Fairview Park? And I think that it's really easy for us to not see what the problems are when we are not the folks living those experiences. It's easy for us to ignore them. And I think through this coalition, it's going to force us to get uncomfortable and ask some tough questions. And I just hope that the folks who you all choose to sit on the coalition are prepared to get uncomfortable, are prepared to, hear answers that maybe we don't want to unearth and share and shine a light on, but are so necessary in order to make sure that our community is not only, inclusive for the people who live here, but we're raising citizens here too, right? And it's important not only on the school side, but on the community side to make sure that the citizens who are growing up here in this community are learning good things and we're leading by example. And I hope that through this coalition, we can do that for our young citizens.
Thank you. That's a very good point. So we are going to continue interviews tonight and continue interviews in 2 weeks, and we will be reaching out to both those who we select and those we don't select to let you know either way. But I do want to just let you know it will be a little bit of time before we have our answers. Okay.
No problem. And thank you all for your time making this happen. I know that you all are in a tough position, having been an elected official myself for 4 years. I know the work that we do. It's tough, and there are going to be people who disagree with us taking the time and doing this, you all taking the time to do this, but I think it's worth it. And I just commend you all for moving ahead with this and staying committed. And I hope whatever comes out of this coalition, whether I'm a part of it or not, I hope you all, take it very, very seriously and, have collaborative input on those actions to make them come to fruition. Because it can't be a plan that just sits on the shelf somewhere and collects dust. It has to, be a roadmap for change.
Thank you. We really, really appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care,
Have a great
everybody.
night.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, I believe next up we have Heather Schneider. Is Heather on the line?
Yes. Hello.
Hi, Heather. How are you this evening?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. We're going to follow the same spiel that we've done for the previous several interviews. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and then we're going to bounce some follow-ups to you, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, so the first question I have is, what makes you a good fit for this task force?
I have lived in Fairview Park for a little over 15 years. My husband was born, raised here. He moved back right after college. My children were born here. They're being raised here. Although this past year has been a little bit different, we have always tried to be very active in the community, volunteering at like the senior center. We're very active in our church. I'm currently on my second year as a catechist for PSR at St. Angela's. So we have tried to be very involved. Obviously, this past year has kind of hampered some things. I do recognize I don't have some of the same experience that other candidates have. I know that my academic education doesn't focus solely in this field, nor does my job. But I'm very passionate about this topic of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I think it stems from my childhood. I grew up in a city right outside of Detroit, very diverse. Moved to the South for college and witnessed some overt public racism and discrimination. So when I started my career, I was very passionate about being any kind of change, helping with any change that I could help with. I am on my firm's DEI executive committee. I also co-chair our LGBTQ plus and gender committee. So I try to be a part of a change.
Thank you. Can you tell us about the actionable steps you'd like to see this committee make to promote change in our community?
First, I feel very strongly that education is necessary. I think our society as a whole could benefit from education on these topics. I think that when some people hear systemic racism and they hear unconscious bias, they get offended. They think that you might be accusing them of being actively participating in racism, and they don't really understand. They don't really understand what the conversation is. They don't understand how maybe they benefited unconsciously from racism. So I think education is so very important because to move forward, you have to have conversations. And if you're not on the same page, those conversations are going to hit so many roadblocks. So I think education is very important. I also recognize that my experiences are a small piece of the experiences of our community members. So I think that it's very important to get feedback from the community. We need to understand the experiences of our community members so that we can address emergent issues, right? As well as keeping in mind that you want to ensure that you are ready for other issues that might emerge, but to really identify emergent issues and tackle those right away. So I think community feedback, community surveys are really important. I think it would, honestly, I think for me to sit up here and be a member of a 9-party committee, to say I would do A, B, and C without hearing from the community, it's kind of comes from a sense of privilege. So.
Thank you for that. Mayor, would you like to ask a couple questions?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Schneider, thanks for joining us tonight. So you were saying that you feel that education is important with respect to this issue. Would you identify that as like the primary goal of the coalition going forward, educating our community about this problem? And how would you I'll just leave it at that.
I think it is a primary goal. I think you can have multiple primary goals. I think that at the same time, you need to understand the experiences of the community. And if that's through community forums, I know that we're in a different environment right now, which it would be great if we could, have people come together. They can't really come together in a space, but through whatever forum you can, surveys, you need to find out what our community members are experiencing. But at the same time, I feel very strongly that in order to have the conversations that are necessary to move forward, to improve, we need to educate people. We need to educate individuals on topics like unconscious bias and for people to recognize that everybody has unconscious biases, okay? And to own that, and for people to understand what systemic racism truly is and how people who don't actively participate in racism can benefit from constructs that have been built over time. So I do really feel that in order to have conversations, people need to start from like the same footing with this, using the same terminology. So I think you can have multiple goals, but I think education has to be a primary one. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, would anybody like to ask Ms. Schneider a question?
Yeah, sure. Ms. Schneider, thank you for coming in, putting in the interest and spending the time here. We definitely appreciate that. So you made comment that you're on a couple of committees with your firm, and you know those sound like some very good experiences. So my questions are, what have those committees done, and how do you think those experiences can help us here in Fairview Park?
So interestingly enough, I'm on the inaugural committee for a firm that has been in business for 90 years. It is a very traditional law firm. And the makeup is your executive level is not diverse. However, the vast majority of our 500 plus employees are very diverse. So it's been a very interesting experience because to the same point, we're trying to educate those that have not experienced any type of discrimination or racism in their life. They come from a very privileged background, okay? Making them understand that that is not the reality for the majority of the community. So it's making them feel comfortable with being uncomfortable first, because we have to get permission to do certain things. But we've been, first step was to advocate for education. Obviously, we've been challenged with getting somebody to come in just because of the, the pandemic and not really wanting somebody to come on site, although that's kind of changing right now. But also one of the first things we did for my committee was we put a survey out. We wanted to know if members of LGBTQ plus, if they were facing issues, and we did have some issues that we needed to face. And that survey, getting that information was great for us to give it to our leadership group, who again, they don't face this. And they think, well, I didn't see it, so that's not happening. And it's to say, it really is happening. It really is happening. This is what happened. So it's fairly new. It started back in July of last year. We meet monthly for the executive committee. We meet monthly for our subcommittees to move forward. Some of the things that my committee wants to implement, we want, affinity groups, we want preferred pronouns, we want safe spaces, and we want the firm to get comfortable with that. So it's a lot of conversation right now to move forward.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned infinity groups. That's kind of a newer concept. So it's good that you guys are interested in that. So I thank you for your answers.
Okay.
Madam
Chairman
Chair.
Waring.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Maureen.
Yeah, Heather, this is more a curiosity question. You said that you're part of this inaugural committee and you have over 500 employees that work for your law firm. Have people been pretty cooperative in terms of responding to surveys and other such things? Does it seem like people are on board? Because that's what I'm hopeful that the community of Fairview will, be anxious. So I'm curious how your law firm is supporting this.
We get a lot of participation in our surveys and in our questions. And the responses are, I think, what people should expect. We have responses of people that are, they think it took too long, right? There are other people that respond and say, there's no reason, we don't need it, which to me is not a good response. But so yeah, there are people that want to be very active in it. But there are people that are honestly, they're just very uncomfortable because they haven't had to deal with this, and they, and it's just getting them to realize they have to deal with it and they have to come along. But I would say people are very encouraged. They're excited. I'm not going to sit here and say that 100% of my firm is just like, yay, go. I don't think, unfortunately, that's one of the problems in our society is because 100% of people aren't saying, yay, go.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Schneider,
Hello.
I'm very interested in your involvement because you're already on the ground running regarding our entire issue here. What surprised me is your comments reference to your childhood. Thank you.
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up a little bit at the end. You wanted me to expand on my childhood?
Yeah, I was a little surprised about what happened during your childhood.
Yes. So I did grow up in a very diverse community. Unfortunately, one of my parents is extremely racist. They're sexist. If you are not a white male, you are somehow very less. You are less worthy. You're less intelligent, no matter what. Fortunately, my other parent did not feel that way. So I was very blessed with that. But you know, growing up in my household, racism was a thing. Family members, friends of my parents, and it took me I wouldn't say a long time. I mean, I was young. In the beginning, I thought something was wrong with me because I felt like I was unique, like what was different about me. And it took, you know, it obviously I had the support of my mother, her family, and others for me to realize I wasn't different. They were wrong.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mrs. Schneider, thank you so much for sharing that. I can't imagine that that is easy to share, especially publicly. But what I will say is, do you believe that that experience would help you to address concerns with people who are overtly racist? So we have spectrum, right? Like we are racist, but addressing it, we're not racist, we're overtly racist, we're covertly racist. Like there's plenty of areas on the spectrum from not at all to the worst in the world, right?
Right.
Do you believe that that experience will help you to understand the mentality of those who are overtly acting this way in our community or surrounding communities?
One, what I would say is I'm never going to understand the mentality. However, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked by what people might say because not only did I witness in my household, I witnessed it when, you know, I was in the South. I wouldn't be shocked. And I've been able to have those conversations with people. I think every member of society should do whatever they can do to address this issue. But I think we also have to recognize there are certain people, and hopefully it's a very small minority, that will continue to be racist because they're afraid their rights will be impacted. They view rights and equity as like a pie, where if somebody else gets a piece of the pie, then I don't get my piece, and they're scared. And I will do forever. I will do whatever I can to continue on with that conversation. So again, I do think my experiences during my childhood with my parent, I'm not going to be shocked. I know how to have that conversation with individuals, but I will never ever understand the mentality of thinking somebody is less than you just because they are not white, they're not male, they're.
Thank you. We have about 1 minute left. Is there anything you'd like to add or leave us with?
Our community can do better, right? I think society can do better. I think we have to do better. I do really appreciate the opportunity to come here today to speak with you. I do appreciate everything that you're doing. I just want to do what I can do to help us improve.
Thank you very much.
Chairwoman Waring?
Yes, go ahead.
Ms. Schneider, thank you very much for joining us here today
Thank you.
For your interest in the coalition and the courage that you showed sharing your personal story. Was really inspiring. And what you said about the, you know, hopefully the small minority of people who feel this way. Unfortunately, we just saw that minority in action in an attack on our Capitol last month. But yeah, it's we have our work cut out for us as a nation. So again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. And one last thing, I view a community like a family. And when you see your family being treated unfairly, poorly, you don't ignore it. And I think that's very important that we treat our community like a family. We support each other. We identify obstacles, we remove them just like you would for your family members. So thank you very, very much and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank you
check
for your
the next
time.
set of interviews, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks. I believe next up we have Brian Acker. Is he on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Hi, Brian. We can hear you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Like I've done with the other candidates, I'll ask you 2 questions and then we'll engage in some follow-up, okay?
All right.
Perfect. The first question is, what makes you a good fit for this task force?
So my main reason that I'm a good fit is because I truly understand that racism, discrimination are truly a problem in our society. It's not something whether people believe or not. It's a reality that we live in, and I want to be part of the solution. I want to help whatever I can in whatever small way I can to help, because I see people of color as human beings like me, and if I had to withstand some of the adversity that they have to go through, it'd be heartbreaking and debilitating for me, and to see family members go through that kind of thing. And I basically just believe that everybody deserves the same rights as each other, the same opportunity as each other. So I just recently made Fairview Park my home a few months ago, and it's a great place to live, and we picked it for a reason. It was top of the list, but just like every other community across America, it has work to do. And as like it said, like you asked in the application, do you see racism in Fairview Park? And some of the other people have said, they haven't seen overt racism, but I hear it in comments in the convenience store, in the gas station, at the grocery store, where people people making subtle political comments in public is more prevalent now than ever. And you can kind of tell how they're feeling about certain issues just by small comments they make, in the line at the cash register and stuff like that. Also, I have a very diverse work experience. It's gone from working in manufacturing environments with other lots of low wage workers to now where I'm in a Bendix, which is very corporate. And I've been able to cross, different communication paths with different types of people from different backgrounds and different cultures. And I think I can help bridge those gaps and help people to empathize with each other. I think that's one of my strengths.
Thank you. What actionable steps would you like to see taken to change our community?
I would start off by saying, I know I don't have, answers at the moment. I'm here to look for the answers, but things that I would like to see is an increase in the diversity of the city. So whether that's, looking at cities across America and finding policies that have been enacted that work for them. Every community is different, and all, budgets are different, and the walls you have to work within are different everywhere. But we have to find out what works for us to be able to increase diversity, and get those things in place so we can have a more diverse community.
Thank you. Mayor, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Acker, thanks for coming in today and welcome to Fairview.
Thanks for having me.
You said Fairview was at the top of your list. Could you tell us why it was, and what other places you might have been looking to move to?
So tops of our list were Fairview, Rocky River, and Berea. Obviously, Rocky River was a short housing look, and actually we looked at places in Berea too. We like that they're kind of some of the more, Berea is a college town, so it has a little more forward thinking feel to it down there. That's kind of what drew us in. But Fairview's, between the location and I grew up in Westlake. It's kind of reminds me of Westlake of old, where the community feels kind of tight knit, more local, independently owned stores. And that's something that we valued as well, is a kind of a tight community with a good education, because we're just looking to set down roots, and have kids here shortly, my fiance and I. And so, yeah, and we know you guys have been spending money. We actually moved in right down from the new elementary school. And so we're kind of excited about the entire family values that we feel like we're getting here.
Very good. I would agree with all of that. What do you view to be the primary goal of the coalition, and how would you go about helping the coalition achieve that goal?
So while there's I guess there's two main goals. Is one goal would be to educate the community on inclusion and anti-racism, whether it has to do with, how we change our education from elementary all the way through high school. But you have to do things like vet the types of textbooks you use. You don't want to use textbooks that are revisionist history and whitewashed. We're only 150 years removed from slavery. There's people alive today that had slave relatives. So educating people on the realities of privilege and the kinds of things that the opportunities they're afforded, as opposed to people of color in our community, is important. So for them to understand the reality and the experience of people of color. Also, I would think even more so is to actually increase the diversity of our community. I'm not exactly sure on the percentages, but I think we're at least 95% white here in Fairview Park. Being able to increase the diversity gives you a new perspective, gives you, so much. We can even look to on the other side of town with Shaker Heights, and you can see, the kinds of people that come out of there that have had these diverse backgrounds and had exposure to peoples of other cultures and other races. It does a lot for people's empathy and building a community.
Thank you, and thanks again for coming in today.
Thank you.
Council, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Acker?
Yes, please,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Maureen?
Okay. Mr. Acker, one of the comments you made in your application was that the coalition should be 50% people of color.
Yeah.
In a community of which we have a very small percentage of people of color, that probably is not going to be achieved. First of all, why do you say that? And then, since most probably we won't be able to achieve that, how do you feel we can more or less tap into some information and input from people of color within our community? How do we tap that resource?
Yeah, it is. I know it was ambitious. I was really hoping to at least to see more. I didn't watch the other round of interviews, so I don't know if there was any interest from any person of color in that round. I've watched all of them today and haven't seen one. I think in the climate today, a person of color putting themselves on this kind of coalition they might feel like they might be putting a target on themselves. That's unfortunate. But I realize that it's difficult when you have a community this heavily skewed white to get that many volunteers, that they just aren't there. I think trying to reach out, and as this coalition grows, and maybe through word of mouth and gaining some popularity, I know I kind of stumbled upon it on finding the application, and I was very excited to see it, and I think it's great that Fairview wants to better itself in this way. But I think hopefully we can kind of build our brand, so to speak, and be able to get more, more volunteers from the community of people of color. I think you're on mute if you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your response.
No problem.
Thank you. I appreciate
Okay, I have one. So, Mr. Ecker, thank you for coming in. We appreciate the interest in the application. Welcome to Fairview. Congratulations on your engagement. The first thing I want to say is you have a very solid beard.
Thank you, sir.
So one of the things you said that I like always hearing is that you say you want to bridge gaps. And so the question I would have is, what approach would you use when trying to bridge gaps between people that may have different ideological views on things?
So there's multiple ways, and I think some things that we can do in our community, just from an education standpoint and exposure, is to, I think if we I don't know if it'd be like fairs or some kind of small conventions, but celebrating other cultures, doing some kind of event to celebrate other cultures, to get people exposed to other people and other ways of thinking. I think that's something we could do. And I think one of the, obviously I was really hoping to have some voices of people of color involved in this coalition, but part of bridging that gap is me being, in my application I wrote about how I'm the kind of the person, I grew up as the person we want to reach out to. I grew up as the person who grew up with maybe with subtle racist ideas or those they're in the back of your head, and they're stereotypes and stuff like that that I didn't necessarily have brought to the forefront of my mind until I was in my 20s, about 15 years ago. So I can understand what those people are going through, where they're saying, I'm not racist, but I don't care about being anti-racist. And that's something that I think I'll be able to speak to and kind of, help people to understand, because I understand how a lot of people are in prevalent white communities that don't necessarily have to think about racism or ever really confronted with it.
That's good. Thank you. I appreciate your time coming in and talking with us today.
Thank you, Greg.
We have about 2 more minutes left. Council, do you have any further follow-up questions? Mr. Acker, is there anything you'd like to leave us with before you go tonight?
So the only thing I would say that I'm a very data-driven person. You can see that in my current work experience and my education background. But I have 2 bachelor's degree. One's in communications from Ohio State, and one's in information systems and operations supply chain from Cleveland State. I know I don't have a lot of experience in these types of coalitions or diversity groups previously, but I have spent 8 of the last 12 years in college. If you look at data and you analyze the data, you can see that people of color are disproportionately imprisoned, disproportionately given opportunities at work, disproportionately incarcerated, and for longer periods of time and with harsher penalties. The list goes on and on. So basically you can either admit that there's systemic racism, or, you believe that people of color are inferior to you. And that's racism. There's not really a middle ground between that. So I'm just here to, try to spread that notion and help rectify that.
Thank you so much for your time, your perspective, and all of this conversation. We really do appreciate it this evening. We do have one more set of interviews 2 weeks from today, and then we will start to decide how we're going to break the committee down. So please be on the lookout for a conversation from us, but understand it will be at least 2 weeks before we do that, okay?
I understand. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acker. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe next is Anne Marie, and I'm going to butcher Ahern. Ahern, how do you say that?
It's Ahern.
Ahern, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Similar to what I've done for all of the other candidates, I'm going to ask a series of 2 questions, and then council and the mayor will ask some follow-up questions, okay?
Great.
Wonderful. So the first question I have is, what makes you a good fit for this task force?
Well, hello, everybody. And I know some of you, for those of you I don't know, hi, nice to meet you. My name's Anne Marie Ahern. I am a lawyer here in Cleveland at a law firm called McCarthy Levitt, Crystal and Liffman. And I have spent the last 22 years representing victims of employment discrimination, primarily as my primary set of clients. Of illegal employment discrimination, and have really committed my career towards principles of equity, inclusion, and social justice. So that was the first question.
Yes.
What was the second question?
The second question is, what actionable steps would you like to see taken to improve our community?
Well, I think Fairview is a great place to live. And I think that, so none of this is intended to be a criticism of the community in any way. But I think that, as a nation, we have we've begun to realize the extent and duration of problems involving racial justice or injustice. And that, Fairview as a community that is not particularly racially diverse, I think struggles to have this dialogue. And I think that we as a community can always do better in making all of our residents feel welcome, accepted, and to make sure that not only our residents, but our visitors are treated with respect and equality. In terms of tangible steps, I think that, as far as I'm aware, there has not been, I don't know that there's been a concentrated effort in this regard previously to really begin to understand our DEI as a community and as a government. So, I think that with any new initiative, we have to first seek to understand before we can act. So I would really want to make sure that we were looking at best practices amongst other, I think we're probably a little late to this game based on some work that I'm doing on some another DEI committee. But I would want to understand what the best practices are. To understand where we have shortcomings, what our residents feel is a good approach, and where they feel that we are lacking. I would want to talk to all of the stakeholders, including minority residents, so that people would have the opportunity to be heard, and then from there begin to implement a plan that is really not a one and done type thing, but something that would be incorporated within the culture of City Hall, and so that we could use that kind of culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of everything that we do. Because in order for a DEI initiative to be successful, it really has to be at the center of your culture as an organization.
Thank you for that. Mayor Cooney, would you like to ask some questions?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Anne Marie. How are you tonight?
I'm good.
Have you represented municipalities or any other government entities in your career?
No, I mostly sue employers. So
Well,
my
we don't want
firm,
it. We don't want any of that, you know.
I would not sue Fairview. My firm represents some government entities because we have at least one lawyer whose practice is he's a law director and represents some municipalities.
What do you see as the primary goal of the coalition, and how would you go about helping it achieve that goal?
I think that we have a community that isn't necessarily as comfortable with diversity as we ought to be. I think these are hard conversations to have. I think that living in a predominantly white community, as I understand it, Fairview is at least 90% white. And so as we look at our Hispanic, our Black, our Asian population, to understand what challenges those residents face, I would want to look at our hiring practices to make sure that we are implementing all of the best practices in attracting a diverse applicant pool, and to make sure that our employees and to the extent that our citizens are interested in these topics have a better fundamental understanding of how bias works in employment, in a community, and in society as a whole. So those are some of the things that I would be concerned about. Because I think that, and part of the reason I got involved is because when I think that a lot of people, when they hear the terms diversity and inclusion and racial justice, that it strikes a nerve, that they feel that they're being accused of being racist. And I think that, getting past that initial hurdle of understanding bias and how it plays out in our society, and understanding that just because the community is concerned about these issues doesn't mean that anybody's, that we're pointing the finger at anybody and calling them a racist. And facilitating these dialogues is the only way that you're going to move towards progress, but it has to be done in a way that people are willing to hear. So you have to present these issues in a way that's collaborative, that is productive, and really facilitative, so that people open their mind to these issues instead of shutting down and becoming combative.
Have you seen that in the other, you said you're on another DEI committee. Do you see people shutting down? Is that through the Bar Association, or is that through?
No, I'm a board member at St. Joseph Academy, and as part of our mission effectiveness committee, we're beginning to explore those concepts. But I've seen enough that, to know that I've seen enough in my work and in my interest in these areas that it's a hot button issue. I mean, we might as well just call it what it is. There's an increasingly polarized. And so what I think is a skill set that I have is to get people to think about things in a way that they may not have thought about them previously, to hopefully build coalition in the middle. Because with any topic like this, there's always, a segment of the population that is going to agree with you. And they're going to say, like the last guy that was interviewed, I was like, yeah, what he was saying, you don't need to convince me. Those things are true, and then there's a segment of the population that you're never going to convince of anything. But my goal is always, and my approach to these types of things is always to concentrate on the people in the middle and to try to understand how you can speak to those people in terms that cause them to perhaps reconsider, the way that they may have always thought about a subject that they may not be entirely comfortable with.
Thank you. Once again, the nuns are ahead of the game, as always. Yeah. Thanks, Anne Marie. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Council, does anyone have any questions?
Yes,
Yeah.
Sarah, if I may.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Maureen.
Greg.
Hi, Anne Marie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. I know you referenced in your application, that obviously your life's work has been committed to this topic of equity and inclusion, as well as referencing, that we need to offer, that you could offer educational opportunities. I didn't know if there's any specific speakers or presenters that you feel would be valuable resources for both the city and specifically the coalition. Are there any that come to mind that you feel would be a good fit?
I don't have any in mind, but I think I could be really effective in vetting, because there's a lot of people who hold themselves out as consultants, but I think that I could be really effective in helping to vet those professionals.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ahern, how
Go
are you
ahead,
doing?
Greg.
Thank you for putting in your application and meeting with us here tonight. So we definitely appreciate the interest. So one of the things that while I was listening, you mentioned the word culture a couple of times, which I think is great because really, it can be a big concept, and something an element of something like this would be referencing culture change. So the question that I have for you is, in your professional experience, have you seen culture change to any degree, and if so, what does it really take to strive towards culture change related to this?
So it's interesting. Yesterday afternoon, I spoke on a panel as part of the Maltz Museum is bringing an exhibit on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I spoke on a panel with a justice from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and a former law clerk who's a law professor of Justice Ginsburg, and we were talking about this, and it was a great audience. There was like 600 people, and we were talking about how change happens and her role in being instrumental in bringing about that change. And I think change most often it happens in meaningful, enduring change happens incrementally. And so I think that there has to be a recognition of this in any kind of diversity and inclusion effort. I think that for me, I have seen it, I can only speak, I want to be very clear. I am not a diversity and inclusion consultant. I'm a person who enforces through lawsuits, civil rights laws. So I am, but I'm aware of how this slow incremental progress has affected my own practice and has benefited my clients. And I think about, for instance, we talk about sex discrimination, some of the cases that I handled early on in my career, and I was talking about this yesterday, some of the way that judges treated female lawyers in the beginning of my career, which is my 23rd year, it would never happen today. It just absolutely would not happen today. I was thinking of a case in particular where my client was told it was going to be hard for her to succeed because it was a good old boys network and she had been passed over for promotion after promotion after promotion. Well, that case today never would have gotten, and the case it ended badly. I stood before an appellate court panel and a judge looked at me and said, "What makes you think, Mrs. Ahern, that the term good old boys network refers to somebody's sex?" And I was kind of like shocked at this question. I didn't even know how to answer it because it was so obvious today. And today that case would, if I look at like how, employers react to these types of claims today, that case would never have gotten to that point because a company of the size of the company that was involved in that case would be very concerned about the messages that they were sending to females who sought to advance. That case was, as I look back on it now, was probably one of the best sex discrimination cases, glass ceiling cases that I have ever been involved with. And it ended very poorly because we weren't there yet. The jury wasn't there yet. The judges weren't there yet. And so I think that, as I look at the last 20 years, and this can be said of sexual harassment, of discrimination against the LGBTQ community. In many areas, I've seen that incremental progress. One area where I haven't seen as much, where the progress has been slower, is in racial justice.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in, the time, and the discussion.
Counselor, are there other questions?
I have to just say one more thing, that whether you select me or not, I am very glad that council is taking on this issue. I think it's fantastic, and kudos. And if I don't end up on your committee, if there's anything that I can do to lend assistance on an ad hoc basis, I would be happy to do it.
Anne Marie, we really appreciate your time and your conversation this evening. It's so great to get the perspective from so many of our residents and so many very diverse backgrounds of where we came from and what we do for a living. So we do appreciate that conversation. I think you've heard me tell the other candidates that we do have one more round of interviews after this committee meeting, so 2 weeks from now, and then we will be evaluating and selecting. So you will hear from us, but it might take a couple of weeks, okay?
Okay, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night.
Anne Marie.
Bye. Okay, and last but not least, tonight we have Jeanette and Pellet Ayala. I'm so sorry. I'm terrible. Do we know if she's on the line?
I do not see her on the line. No.
Okay. Well, she goes at 8:15.
Okay.
You know what, Bridget, if it's okay with you, could we take a quick 5-minute break and give her a minute to get on? And then if not, then we can move to your committee, but at least we're all semi-refreshed.
Yep, that sounds like a great plan.
Okay, let's take a quick 5 minutes and hopefully she will join us.
Perfect.
Okay, it's been just about 5 minutes. If everybody's there and could come back, I'd appreciate it. So unless I am missing it on the call, it looks to me like she has not, yep, Liz just messaged me, she's not signed on yet. So I guess at this time, I will go ahead and close out committee, and if we can get a hold of her, perhaps we will schedule her for another evening. So that being said, does anyone have anything they would like to add on the issue of systemic racism and the city's response this evening?
Great job yet again, Sarah.
Thank you, much appreciated. I'm going to make a motion to leave this issue in committee. Mike?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Sarah, yes. Bridget?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Passes 7-0. Local government and community services ends at 8:21 p.m.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And that was fantastic. We're getting some great people applying here. All right. Finance Committee will begin at 8:21 p.m. And first up, we're going to finish up our budget hearings. We don't have senior life on.
I'm going to try to, sorry, Madam Chair, I'm going to try to get a hold of Laura and also Greg. I think we're a little early, so I'm going to call them both. I know they're both here, so
Okay.
I don't know if I see Walt's on the line. I don't know how you want to.
Can we start with Walt without Greg Single?
I think so.
Okay.
But I'm going to call Greg right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Walt, are you ready for us? Hello. Wait, you're muted. Walt, you're muted.
Yeah, good evening. I need Greg. He's my backup here.
No, you don't need him. You can do it.
If I deviate at all, I'd like him to straighten me out.
Okay.
Well, they jumped. They must have been listening because they're all here now. So.
Is Laura ready? I mean,
I'm here. All right, Laura, then why don't you go ahead and start us off? You should be pretty quick.
Yeah. I did have a slide presentation that I think Liz was going to share, if she could. Maybe.
Yes, I'm going to put it up here. I am trying to pull it up.
Thank you.
Yep. That's not it.
That's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. The first slide I was going to show is with the picture of, there's us, and the staff picture, the next one, Liz. Yeah.
Huge staff, right, Laura?
Huge.
Huge staff, right.
The senior center staff has 2 full-time employees and 3 part-time staff members. That's a change from 2019 when we had 3 full-time employees, and that's reflected in our budget for 2021. Sandy, Kathy, and myself are still able to assist the Fairview seniors, even though the center is currently closed. We're doing tax preparation for seniors, modified for COVID restrictions. Our social worker is helping them with Medicare applications on the phone. And all of us have been helping Fairview seniors obtain COVID-19 appointments, as they can be a little hard to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
And the next slide, the meals at the senior center that we had before the pandemic forced us to close our doors on March 13th. We had 3 lunches here a week. It was a cold lunch on Mondays and hot meals on Thursdays and Fridays. the total of 2,391 meals served in before the pandemic. So January, February, and March. And the next slide, please. But during the pandemic, we have, from April through December of last year, we delivered a total of 11,151 meals to Fairview seniors. And our lunch program is made possible by the Older Americans Act through a grant from the Ohio Department of Aging and administered by the Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging. We received a grant in the amount of $18,459 for 2021. And we will continue to deliver the weekly meals to the seniors until we feel it's safe to resume our congregate lunch program. And thank you to all the volunteers like Mayor Cooney and Kathleen and Angie at the city for helping us with that. We couldn't do it without you. So the next slide, please. Our senior life transportation provided approximately 3,000 rides last year to medical and dental appointments, grocery shopping, banking, and to and from the senior center. We have two 12-passenger vans that have wheelchair lifts, a smaller van pictured here with our friend Pam, and a new Chevy, not new, a new to us Chevy Malibu sedan. And because of COVID, we can only take one rider at a time. So I'm really happy to say that on Wednesday, we have a new van driver starting, and we're really excited to have her and looking forward to being able to give more seniors some rides with her on our staff. Next slide, please. We have many programs here at the Senior Center. Last year, over 400 seniors participated. Silver Sneakers exercise. We have a billiard room. Lots of card playing happen here. Bingo, art classes, book clubs, and weekly movie viewing. And we do have a software system here that helps us keep track of who comes to the center. It's called My Senior Center. And we had over 3,000 key fob swipes for 2020. And My Senior Center has a $1,200 annual fee and has been budgeted to come from the Senior Life Advisory Council Fund reflected in our budget. And the next slide, please. And I just wanted to share this picture from the outdoor concert that we had, which was our first annual outdoor concert. We had a beautiful day at Bain Park with over 50 seniors in attendance, and we really hope to make this an annual event at the Senior Center. And it was all, they brought their own lunches, but they were, a dessert was donated to them from a senior living facility. The next slide, please. That's just another picture. You can go to the next one. And we were still able to hold our Seniors Helping Seniors event. The Fairview Park High School seniors raked the leaves of 56 Fairview Park seniors. And I look forward to continuing this program with Principal Vicka again this year. And next slide, please. And in 2021, we're planning an upgrade to our computer lab. We received a donation of $2,500 from the Northeast Ohio PC Club, and we're going to be able to add 6 new computers as well as a new printer, scanner, fax machine to our lab. And we hope that this upgrade will help us expand our virtual programming, the technical assistance, some virtual yoga, and we would like to introduce some Silver Sneakers wellness classes, which would be a new thing for us. And next slide, please. And we really do miss having people in the center. We look forward to when we can return to normal and share weekly meals and play bingo and cards and socialize. And hopefully we will get to see that in 2021 and we can safely reopen our senior social center. And next slide, please. And, you know, I hope to keep our website updated, and you can always check out our senior newsletter, which outlines all of the events coming up at the senior center. Thank you. That's all I have.
Great, thank you, Laura. I have a question for you about the budget under Senior Life Donation Fund. For the final for 2020, it was $32,133.99, and then we're only estimating $3,000 this year. What happened last year that we got so much?
That was from the Senior Life Advisory Council Fund was combined with our Senior Life Donation Fund. It used to be like a separate bank account. Am I right, Bill? Yes. And that was transferred into our Senior Life Donations Fund. That's what happened last year.
Why is it only going to be?
Well, I estimated the donations because of the events that we make. We have here at the Senior Center for that are based on donations are almost all primarily events that involve like lunches or, you know, we had every May we would have the senior prom, which is dancing and eating. And I don't believe that we can have that kind of event yet. So that's why it's estimated at what it is.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have questions for Laura? Would anyone else like the floor?
I don't have a question, but I just want to say hello and thank you for everything that you and everyone does at the Senior Center and in the entire department. You guys probably have had the most, probably one of the toughest years considering the population. So I just want to say thanks for everything you guys do, and we appreciate everything.
Thank you, Greg. That's very nice of you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Laura for stepping in and bringing up the Senior Center to 2021 status. As a member of the Senior Center and a member of our community, we will put our Senior Center against any other on the west side of Cleveland. We have a limited staff, a limited income, and we still compete with the larger centers in the area because of the work of our huge staff.
Thank you, Bill.
Bridget, if I may?
Yes.
Thank you. Laura, first I want to recognize that you guys have done a fantastic job, that even though your doors are closed because of COVID, that does not mean our Senior Center is not rendering services, which is something I think we need to really recognize as we're looking at this budget. Some would say, you know, we have this money for food. How can we possibly, you know, we're not meeting for meals, but the answer is you guys are delivering it, which is more than we have ever asked of our senior center employees. And we really appreciate that going above and beyond. I have a couple questions about how do you think COVID will impact your budget? Did you take into consideration that if you reopen for good, God willing, in June, if we can all get vaccines, did you provide enough money in there, or did you budget it as if you're going to be closed for the rest of the year? What should we expect?
I budgeted it as like half a year's, you know, in thinking that we would maybe possibly open in the summertime. So that's because I just didn't know for sure. So I based it on like half of a year rather than an entire year. And like I said, with the staffing changes, but we only have 2 full-time staff now as opposed to 3 that they had in the past. So that is reflected in there too. But like I said, I really hope we can open. And if we do, it will still be on, I mean, I just know it'll still be on a smaller scale than when it was really rocking and busy in here.
I do have one other question too, and it's relative to the senior van replacement fund. I know, I think it was 2 years ago, we purchased a new van. Can I just double check that $5,000, is that for maintenance or is that going into a holding fund for future expenditures on a new van? And when are you expecting to need new vehicles for the center?
Ooh,
I didn't mean to stump you, I'm sorry.
Well, we do have a new, as far as a van goes, I don't know when we would need a new van. We did just get a new car, like a sedan, that was actually Mayor Patton's old vehicle. So we have that. The one van is fairly new, so I really don't know when we would need a new one. I'm sorry, I don't know. I believe that they've told me that the number 65 van is fairly new. Then we have 2 of those, and then we have 1 here that isn't working at all that I still need to figure out what to do with because it's just kind of sitting there. So
Didn't we have didn't Monica secure a grant last year for a car or for?
She tried, but
Oh,
yeah, we were not successful in that.
okay.
Greg, do you happen to know the answer whether that $5,000 in the senior van replacement is going to a holding fee or if that's for maintenance?
Through the chair, Councilwoman Waring, that goes to a holding account for a new van.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to double check that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Laura?
Chairwoman King?
Yes.
Hey, Laura, I just want to say that you're doing a great job as a rookie here. And
thank you.
Do you see anything that the center's, besides more help, that the center's lacking, that they're kind of like a wish list item?
Yeah, well, the new computers was definitely the first on my list. That when we received that donation, I was pretty excited because the ones in there are really, really old. And we do have a wish list of sorts, just like we have billiards room that was just repainted, and the guys are always looking for things to hang on the wall, new pool sticks, that kind of thing. And then we do show weekly movies. We always like having movies to show to the seniors. And that's all I can think of right now.
As far as mechanically and appliances and things of that nature, everything's functioning.
Everything in the kitchen, the dishwasher does not work, but we really don't. They haven't used it in the whole time that I've been here. But the oven, the stove.
These meals with no dishwasher.
I know. The seniors actually, when I first started here, as a part-time staff member, I tried washing the dishes, and the senior volunteers were like, "Go away! This is our job." They took over that kitchen. So, yeah, they really prided themselves on being helpful and being here. And so, I could think about a wish list a little bit more, but as of right now, that's all I can think of.
All right. Well, thanks again. You're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying.
Thanks for your time.
Well.
All right. Any other questions for Laura? Well, Laura, I want to echo what everyone else is saying. You really took over the hard time with COVID and everything, and to keep senior population engaged at this time was a challenge that you've really stepped up and are doing a great job. So thank you very much for everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the recommendation on our newest van driver.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Excited to have her.
Good. I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Laura. And next we'll move over to Walt. You ready, Walt?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
All right.
Council. I don't have a lot of the annual report. I know you guys all got a copy of it, and most of that report is like reading the matrix to you guys. I understand the numbers. I understand the inspections. If anybody have any questions on that, I'd be more than happy to go over anything independently on it. Some stuff the pandemic did do to us, we did decrease our permits by only 19 for the year. That's additional work. That could be driveways. It could be a lot of things. But our fees collected last year did increase by over $100,000. Much of that is attributed to NASA project, collecting the fees late in the year last year. Our permanent inspections were down from 2019 considerably, like 300 permanent inspections down. And our violation inspections, property maintenance, apartment, and rental dwelling inspections were down about 50%. And we were short-staffed, as you know, with our property maintenance inspector and Megan being furloughed for most of the summer, which is our busiest time for those inspections. The investment that was made last year in our community was still considerable. Based on permit work, we still had $39 million worth of work done, which is a lot of it goes to NASA too. Our tax abatement, we had 11 applicants for tax abatement. Much of it was garages, a couple of new homes. In 2019, we had 21 applicants with 2.8 million of taxable monies abated. This year, 600,000. But we don't have all the houses going on the tax abatement that we had from River South and from Thomas Lane. So that's a little bit there that went down. Thomas Lane is almost complete. We're still waiting on a couple of engineers' reports and a couple lawns to go in before we wrap that one all up and release it to the homeowner association. The NASA project is going well, and the other commercial businesses are doing well. We saw a boom right off the bat. We had a couple inspections a day for new garages. A lot of permits are waiting to be picked up. We really didn't slow down. Numbers for as far as inspections go, but we were short, an inspector. Money spent almost exactly the same as it was in 2019. As far as our department, we were very careful doing the inspections and practicing social distancing, and we're starting back up our apartment inspections probably last week in March, and our rental dwelling inspections the last week in March. And as I believe our mayor mentioned, Matthew Kiley, our property maintenance inspector, did get approved and issued his state license, residential building inspector license. So he's going to be an additional help to us on the residential side of the inspections. As far as my budget goes, you see we increased our personnel. We have 97% of his personnel and really can't change much of that. And we're 3% of our budget is some discernible numbers that there's really not a lot we can do as far as cutting more costs. Once Matt is now an inspector, state license, we do have to include his renewals in our memberships and so forth with the state and inspectors organizations. So our number did go up there from 2020 considerably on that appropriations on page 9. But I think the estimated revenues, if we had a chance to look at that on page 3, the numbers are all over the board. Some are up, some are down. And a lot of that is our fees that were collected for NASA. NASA building permits were issued. Their plumbing, electrical, and HVAC permits have not been issued yet, which is some of the ups and downs between 19 and 20. We've got some other projects. There's an empty storefront in Westgate that a lot of you know about. We still haven't heard from them as far as their reworking the lighting. Some of the fire sprinkler system has been changed around. As far as I've been told, we haven't actually inspected it or talked to any of the engineers here yet. But that will be another some revenue coming in on that. It's basically a pretty simple one for me this year. There's not a lot changed, and I'm getting better at it of estimating revenues and expenditures. And I know you mentioned about a wish list. I wish the pandemic would end. I want all my residents and all of my coworkers to be healthy and stay healthy. As far as my department goes, we spoke with Director Single, and he'll probably be bringing some office equipment, copiers for the building. And we've been working on trying to be able to accept credit cards with our doors actually being closed except for appointments. It's kind of difficult to collect a check or have someone drop a check or cash into our mailbox outside. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing that in our mailbox. There's a locked mailbox, but the credit card over the phone, Director Single and I have been working on that. And we look forward to having that taken care of this year. Other than that, we're looking forward to good weather. I'm not looking forward to probably Friday morning after all of our residents get out and walk Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week, and give me a call on Friday morning about yards.
Mm-hmm.
But that pretty much wraps it up. I appreciate everything you guys have done for us. In the zoning meeting today, we were discussing our fence ordinances and comparing them to other communities. We're going to leave that there until next meeting, and then Councilman Minnick, we may bring something to you based on their recommendations. Thank you, guys.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Walt, do you know of any business that in the city that closed because of COVID?
That's a good question.
I do not know of any that closed because of COVID. No.
It says a lot for our city. Thank you.
I would like to add that our development director today,
You're cutting in and out. I can't hear you.
there's nothing I can do here. Tell my kids to get off the internet. I spoke with Mary Kay today regarding a potential client in our community that was looking for some space. And everything that I know, we don't have the space available for him. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I was hearing people tell me all the empty storefronts, there's really none. Next to McDonald's, they just moved back in. Right as a bakery, they're moving over. Everybody's staying in, or who's here wants to be here, and it's awesome. I love it.
That is great.
Have you gotten any more phone calls on the garbage cans?
Chairwoman,
Yes, yes. Go ahead. Council President, go ahead.
Yeah, Walt, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. You said we have a lack of empty storefront. How's the old Blockbuster space?
Funny you mentioned that because that's exactly what I offered. It was large enough for them with the parking they may need. That is one that I think, from what Mary Kay was explaining to me, it might work out for that guy. That's a tough corner. That's a really tough space too.
Been empty for the last 20 years. So.
Yeah.
In fairness, I did rent a VHS from there once, and I have not lived here for 20 years yet. So let's go with 13 years, right?
We'll give you that.
Be kind, rewind.
All right, any other questions for Walt? Well, thank you very much for coming in. And on a personal note, Walt, thank you for always answering my questions in a very timely manner. I really appreciate all the help you've given me the past year answering my questions as I learn my way.
That's what I'm here for.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Walt.
All right, our next order is ordinance 2111, authorizing the repairs for the 2008 sewer jet vehicle.
Do you want to do something with the appropriation?
Oh, yes, I have to. I'm sorry. Thank you. I would like to make a motion to put the 2021 appropriations on third read and final passage for next week. Mike?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. And Greg?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 7-0. Okay, now ordinance 2111, the sewer jet vehicle repair. We were waiting for final numbers. So Director Costello, if you want to take it away.
Thank you. We are sad to hear from our technical partners at Doheny that additional work would top $100,000 for some of the work and the back end of this vehicle. Of course, that type of investment in a 13-year-old going on 14-year-old vehicle is just not feasible. So we are going to ask City Council to approve the ordinance as presented so that we have this vehicle operating safely in our community and with our employees, because it is a very important part of our emergency response. But we're not going to go to those great lengths to work on parts of the equipment that constitute repairs to some leaks. So in other words, if someone complains to you about our sewer jet leaking, please assure them that's clean water. We're not going to be using it as a vacuum in any scenario. If we were to need that service, we would contact our county public works professionals and use their equipment. Of course, we have had great success with our neighbors in North Olmsted being very proactive and helping us out when we find ourselves in a bind. So we will leave our repairs on this equipment at the requested amount this evening. And thank you for your patience in holding it as we let the professionals at Doheny take a little closer look at this equipment for us. Appreciate that extra time. Thank you.
So do you think that by putting in these repairs, will that just get us through one more season? Do you have any estimate idea?
I'm hoping to, because even if we start the process next year, it does take some time to get a truck ordered and secured. So this would be something that I would definitely be addressing in next year's budget. But this year, I believe these repairs will allow us to use this equipment safely and efficiently for at least the remainder of this year.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions about this one?
Bridget, if I may.
Yes.
Mary Kay, this is going to come off sounding ridiculous, but you're telling us that there's $100,000 in repairs needed on this vehicle. We're going to do 1/5 of that cost. What are the other $80,000 in repairs? And how can we be sure that this vehicle is safely operating in our city if we're only going to do 1/5 of what is wrong with it? And I'm sure that the answer is easy, but I don't know it. So I'm asking so that
That's
confident.
No, that's a great question. So as I had mentioned, the other repairs would be involved in taking the entire tank portion of the back end off the vehicle and re-welding a new back end for all intents and purposes. And so if you look, if in your mind you can imagine the sewer jet, that back end is a big tank. And so in order to seal up some of those leaks and drips that are happening, they are proposing to rebuild that tank. And we're just not going to do that. And that's so that the machine doesn't leak as it's taking clean water from site to site. So the only thing we will have in the back of that tank is clean hydrant water. And so by not doing these repairs, we are not going to use this as a vacuum truck. So in the past, we would have vacuumed out catch basins. We won't use it for that. When we clean catch basins, we'll use other equipment that and transfer it to our facility where our rollout or our dumpster that goes to a special landfill for street sweepings and catch basin debris will collect it. So that's one change in how we use this, but we'll still be able to use it for its main purpose, which is jetting sewer lines and clearing blockages. Does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you. I'm a little sad that we're going to lose some capability, but if there is a workaround in the interim, at least we can be assured it's safe. So I do appreciate you explaining that difference. What would one of these vehicles cost new? What are we looking at as a budgetary hit in approximately 2 years or 1 year, depending on usage?
So we looked at the state cooperative purchasing contracts, and they range from $385,000 to in the high 400s, 475,000, depending on the size of that tank that we talked about. So we would probably try to budget at the high end and between 450 about for a new vehicle.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering my questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this? Then I would like to make an amendment to this in the 4th whereas clause, because some of the wording I think is a little confusing. The second additional there, I think it should say this work in addition to, not in additional to. And additional to those readily observable and listed above, comma, and then we should take out and for additional funds for, because that seems to be a little excessive.
Bridget, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Is this whereas clause necessary at this point, given that we've already identified that we're not going to cover what is additional? Perhaps that's a question for Mary Kay and the mayor. I'm not sure. Oh, you're muted.
I know. I'll get it one of these days as soon as the pandemic's over. So what we'd asked for there is the ability to use the funding. So when we brought this to you we knew that we had over $10,000, close to $15,000 worth of work to do. And we wanted just that remainder, that $6,000. So if, as they took something apart that we didn't know about in our quote, that we would have authorization to use that full $20,000. Hopefully, it comes in much lower, and we don't find anything. So that was the initial intent. And so as they started this work, they told us that they would get us this other quote, and obviously far too much. But if as they're replacing one of the seals and they just see another seal near it that needs to work, we're hoping that we can use this, this ordinance to pay for anything within reason that they find while they're working.
Okay, so that whereas clause is necessary then. Okay, thank you.
Yes, please. I
Then I'm in
appreciate that.
support of your amendments, Bridget.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions about ordinance 2111? All right, then I would like to make a motion that the amended will be on third read and final passage next week. Mike?
Yes.
Okay. Brian?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. And Greg?
Yes.
All right. Next up, ordinance 2114, repeal and replace the HVAC maintenance and service agreement. We are replacing an amendment or an ordinance 2022, which was passed in May of last year. Director Casella, do you want to talk about this?
Yes, thank you. Last year, we passed this ordinance requesting permission to conduct an RFP, request for proposals for heating and cooling HVAC services for the city, including the Gemini Center. And we had 6 or 7 responses, and they were all very good. In fact, as we ranked those RFPs, 2 firms tied. All of our rankings added up led to a tie. And so we scheduled a panel of our service and some of our administrative people to interview the 2 firms. So that pushed out the selection time a little further than we had anticipated, which was a good thing. We were happy to have so much participation, and we're so very happy. I think I may have mentioned during budgets how pleased I am with Smith and Obie. So taking that extra time really paid off. And we got to know Brewer and Garrett a little better. They were the other firm. And as you know, they've taken responsibility for our very fragile pool packs. And so in getting to know them, we learned of their specific and unique experiences with that equipment. So all of that time did push back the time frame for the HVAC services. And so Director Single, rightly so, wanted us to have a full contract period and have our ordinance now reflect what our contract periods really are, so that this piece of legislation can coordinate with those contracts, or our contract with Smith and Obie, I should say.
And it looks like it went down from 27,000 to 26,000.
Yes, 27,000 was what we were budgeted, and 26,000 is what we negotiated the firm to accept the city.
So, and the dates in this new one is from October 1st of 2020. So who is doing this now?
So
Smith
this
and
is
Obie?
for,
Okay.
yes,
And they've been doing it since October.
correct.
Okay. All right, any other questions on this one? All right. Seeing Hearing none, then I'm going to make a motion to place ordinance 2114 on second and subsequent third reading. Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. And Greg?
Yes.
All right, then finally tonight, resolution 2101, the ODOT winter contract for road salt. I feel like this is just kind of a standing operating procedure. We do this every year.
Right. I like to think of this as housekeeping. This is authorizing us to participate in the state's state of Ohio cooperative purchasing agreement for salt, the salt contract. And it has been a powerful tool in our ability to purchase using that economy of scale that only the state can build in items like this.
My only question is, and Greg, this might be for you. I don't know if resolutions versus ordinances, we don't list a fund number that we're going to be paying this out of. Do we not do that on resolutions? We only do that on ordinances? Because it looks like last year they didn't as well.
I don't know the answer to that. It's more of a legal question, so it could be because it's in the form of a resolution. But we buy salt from two funds normally, or that would be the Capital Projects Fund, Fund 811. And then also the Fund 220, which is a state highway fund. So you want to add it, that's fine, but I think ODOT just requests a resolution to purchase salt from them.
Okay.
But those are the two funds where salt will be purchased.
Okay. All right. Mike, what do you think? Do you think that's something that should be amended and put in there? Or since it wasn't last year, it looks like it hasn't been in the past. Oh, wait, you're muted.
I don't see a problem with it, Bridget.
Leaving it as is? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Then anyone have questions on this? All right, then I'm going to make a motion that this resolution be put on second, subsequent third then. Mike?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. And Greg?
Yes.
Okay, and that's it for the Finance Committee. We end at 9:08 p.m.
Thank you, Bridget. Great job. Sarah, you as well. Very good job. Okay, we'll have boards and commissions reports. Ryan?
Yeah, the only thing is the rec commission next meeting is next Tuesday the 16th at 6 p.m. And that's all.
Thank you. Bill?
Nothing, Mike.
Maureen?
Nothing, Mike.
Sarah?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Bridget?
Nothing, thank you.
Greg?
Nothing.
Okay, roundtable. Brian?
That's it tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Bill?
I get requests from my colleagues. If any council members should see a semi going north from Lorraine Road heading towards Westgate, please call the police. There's been several semis taking down wires and driving down Elmore, 204 and 210. So I would appreciate it if the police were contacted if you observe a semi going towards Westgate. Thank you.
Maureen?
Nothing, thank you.
Sarah, anything for roundtable?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Bridget?
Nothing, thank you.
Greg?
Just compliments everyone, with this second round of interviews. I think everything went really good again, and Sarah did a great job. Bridget did a good job with your committee as well. And then also just to recognize today, Monday, March 8th is International Women's Day. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz, do you have anything for roundtable?
I do not, no.
Okay, all right. Yeah, the Zoom isn't the most ideal format for these interviews and for these meetings in general. And hopefully it's not going to last much longer. But as long as it does, can we please to stop, so we don't talk over each other, please ask to be recognized by a chairperson before speaking. Could I ask council to do that? I appreciate it. All right, I have nothing else this evening. If we want to adjourn. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.